Hey everybody, welcome back to the Grognards Corner, and we're taking a look at something a little bit different. We're jumping into the wayback machine, which kind of what most of the stuff I do is anyways. But not only are we jumping in the wayback machine, we are jumping into a dim, dark, distant, probably not well-known, unforgotten corner of the wargaming history. We are taking a look at Battle for Armageddon. And this is part of the wargame series that Games Workshop company put out. Now, I could sit here and go on for hours my general disgust and distaste for Games Workshop. However, I won't. I will say that there was a time and there was a point in the dim recesses of the past. GW actually used to be a almost decent game company. Believe it or not, and I know this is older than probably some of my viewers, but there was a time Games Workshop did stuff other than Fantasy, 40K, Blood Bowl. There was actually a time when White Dwarf actually had articles and did stuff other than just Games Workshop. I remember White Dwarf actually having D&D adventures in it. Not like the fucking glorified catalog that White Dwarf has turned into. But back in the 80s, GW did a lot of different games. There was a lot of games that they did. They did Talisman. A lot of people know of that game. That was always real popular. Just a whole plethora of stuff that they did that just necessarily wasn't miniatures based. Now, Battle for Armageddon was part of their war game series. It's part of a series of games that I think the original plan was for them to do 4 or 5 of them initially, but I think only 3 of them were ever released. Battle for Armageddon, Horus Heresy, and Doom of the Eldar. They all came in these similarly huge boxes. This is a very, very thick box. I mean, you can just tell. It's very deep. Now, this one, my copy, is beat to hell and back, because I think I purchased this, I want to say, winter of '92 when I was in Singapore and stationed in Japan, and so yeah, it was all over the Pacific with me. Kind of got crushed all over the place. This kind of always been kind of a fun game for me. Is probably definitely not one of my top 10, but it's a quick, easy game and rather enjoyable. And you'll notice this is definitely GW's late 80s artwork. So let's go ahead and take a, who was that? Rick Presley, I think. I don't know. I can't remember. Take a look in the box. Let's go ahead. Let's not look at that yet. It's basically the fight for the world of Armageddon between orcs, lots of orcs, and the Imperial Guard. Let's go ahead and take a look at the counters real quick. Oops, I think I just broke my Ziploc baggie. So here is a typical counter. Now this is a big counter. Let's see if this zoom in for a little bit. This is a big counter. I mean, you can just tell looking at it. I mean, this is well over an inch in size, and it is pretty thick, heavy cardstock. And you know, got the clan insignia on the back. And the game basically is your standard attack, defense, move, or attack, move, defense, however it is. I could be getting into more on that in a little bit, but the game basically broke down into, there were 3 orc tribes: Goths, Bad Moons, and Red Suns. And they were attacking the industrial planet of Armageddon to try to take it over, because that's what orcs do. The cool thing about this game, and what set it apart from a lot of other different games, is each side had these strategy cards. And again, this is really thick card stock here. But there was, what, 5, 4, 5, something like that. But this determined, at the beginning of each turn, you chose 2 of these tiles. Each side secretly chose 2 of these tiles, and that's basically how your turn order would go. Orcs would always go first. So say, you have combat and movement. So say you play this one as your first tile. All your units would be able to do combat, and then you'd be able to do movement afterwards. Then it would flip over to the other person's turn. They'd flip over their strategy card, do what they want, do what the card says, and then it would flip back to yours for your second one. So and since you could only use each card or each tile per turn, there was no way of mimicking the same card again. So you had 1 combat and movement, 1 build and movement, 1 movement and combat, another movement in combat, and another combat in combat. So a part of the game was trying to figure out and think ahead, all right, what am I going to accomplish this turn? What do I want to try to accomplish this turn? And how am I going to go about accomplishing it? A little bit deeper thinking than your standard I go, you go phases. So this mechanic is probably one of the coolest mechanics I've ever seen in wargaming. I honestly wish it was a mechanic that was used in other systems, because I just think it adds that extra level of command and control. And fog of war, you don't know what your opponent's going to be doing. You don't know what you're going to be doing. Well, hopefully you'll know what you'll be doing. The other thing that I kind of thought was pretty cool about it was... Oh, there's another strategy card. Which one's that one? Combat and movement. Okay. So you had all these strategy cards too, which basically were random events that you got. And you started off with one of these at the beginning of the game, and I think you drew one every turn, and you could play one a turn. And basically it's just, these are cards that just enhance stuff that's going on the battlefield, like Mad Boys Go Bonkers, strange conjunction of planets, moons, lead your Mad Boys to act in an inspired, lunatic manner. Play this card at the start of any orc combat phase. Allows you to +1 to the dice roll of the combat results for any attacks that include 1 or more Mad Boys counters. And they're all kind of like that. They're enhancements. And there is a lot of orc counters. I mean, you've got Gargants, and there's Gretchen, and Bike Boys, and if you know Games Workshop, you know the 40K universe, you know what all those are. And defending Armageddon is, of course, the stalwart defenders of the Imperial Guard. And, of course, they've got their cards as well. They're random cards. And they've got the Imperial strategy cards. Now, the strategy cards, or the tiles, are identical for both sides. So, combat and movement, movement and combat, combat and combat, movement and combat, building and movement, combat and movement. And then, of course, Imperial Guard forces, for the most part, are your standard Imperial Guard infantry. There's, Rough Riders, Hive Gangs for city defense, more Imperial Guards, and of course, there's the Hive cities themselves. And there are also 3 chapters of Space Marines that eventually show up as reinforcements. Let's see if I can find one of them. Yeah. So, Salamanders, Ultramarines, and one other one. I can't remember what the other Marine chapter is. There was an expansion that was eventually put out about a year later that represented the Chaos's attack on Armageddon 300 years earlier. So basically you used the exact same rules and played the game using Chaos forces instead of orcs. And it had, they've got their strategy cards in there, their random cards in there as well. Big old dice. Nice, big, thick dice. This is basically your combat chart. Is about the only one. I wish there had been 2 in here, but there was only one. But, it has your basic sequence of play, strategy segment where both players figure out what their actions are, and goes all the way through. Victory segment, you check to see who's won. Build points for the Imperial Guard. Basically, every turn you get X number of build points depending on how many cities, hive cities you've got left, and then you can determine your reinforcements that way. Of course, victory conditions for Orcs and Imperials, terrain effects chart, and the combat results table. Yeah, I'm gonna sit here and I'm gonna say I think I've seen this exact same combat results table in a few issues of Strategy and Tactics magazine. The combat system is attacker, ratio, defender, figure out the odds column, modify by terrain, roll a d6, and see what happens. Attacker eliminator, attacker routed, attack stopped, exchange, defender withdraws, defender routed, defender eliminated. You played war games long enough, you've seen this chart 1,000 times. Not a tough combat system. I will say I enjoy combat systems like this because it makes it easier for me to jump into a game. It's like, all right, well, it's an attack ratio. All right, I just need to kind of glaze over, glance over, see if there's any chrome added to it. It allows me to get into a game much easier. And on the back of it had Imperial setup instructions. You've got the 5 hive cities, all the Imperial armies, Imperial armor, fortification markers, and then Orc setup. Pretty easy. All 3 Orc tribes are set up full. You get 52 Orc counters. Yay! And then special unit rules. There's Commissar Yark, Hives and Factories, Smoking Ruins, Gazgo, Thraco, Marine chapters, Ultramarines, Marine Commander Dante. So yeah, your basic administration. Rulebook, not too thick, and as is typical of most Games Workshop stuff, more than half the rule book is fluff. The rule book is 24 pages, and 9 of the pages are rules. And as you can see, if you know old school Games Workshop, you've seen this artwork before. I actually kind of like this older GW artwork. Not a real big fan of the new direction that GW has taken in the last 20 years. But you have campaign history, and it's a good fun read. I actually enjoyed the historical background for it. So 10 pages of rules, not that tough. Well, let's go ahead and spread out a little bit so I can crack open the map. And one of the things I always appreciated about this game is that the map board is heavy cardboard, reminiscent of Avalon Hill war games. And anything that did that back in the 80s, I was always deeply appreciative of, because I was still spoiled by mounted map boards that Avalon Hill did. So, here's the map. I don't think I can zoom all the way out and get it all. But basically, you have your Imperial production track. Whenever you decide you want to produce something, it takes so many turns. So if you want a Titan Legion or an Assault Corps, it's going to take 4 turns. Fortifications and tank divisions, Rough Riders, Imperial Guard, Hive gangs, Hive defenses. So not only do you have to pay for everything, it also takes a certain amount of turns before they can actually pop up. And then, of course, your obligatory turn chart and the build points over here. And at the very top, you've got, the terrain effects chart. I mean, it's very, as far as map boards go, it's very, very, the only thing it doesn't have on is the combat effects table, which is on that separate chart I showed you. So let's see if I can crank this down a little bit so we can get a close-up look of the map. But basically, the orcs start on the west side of the map, and the 3 different tribes, and none of the tribes can stack together. So basically you've got 3 different army groups, if you want to call them that. And why they're called army groups I'll get into a little bit. But basically, pretty much anywhere in the woods along the western side they can set up. Actually, I think they can go all the way to the River Styx. Yeah, it's all the way to the River Styx. And I think there's a stacking limit of like 3 or 4 units. But yeah, the objectives are the hive cities. You've got 5 hive cities. You've got Hell's Reach, you've got Infernus, Hades way up here, Acheron, Tartarus. Are you seeing a theme with the names here. Planet of Armageddon, different levels of hell. Yeah, well, yeah, never said GW was all that original. And basically what it is the orcs come sweeping on from the west, and they've got to capture and destroy. Now, those are hive cities, and then there's also these normal cities. The orcs have got to capture and destroy 3 of the hive cities, but they've also got to knock out as many of these cities as possible, because the cities is also what give you production. Eventually, the Imperial Guard is just going to keep out producing the orcs, because the orcs don't get as much stuff back as the Imperial Guard does. It's kind of tough for the orcs to get stuff back. 8 turns in the grand scheme of things. I think, you know, a couple capable players can get the game knocked out in 45 minutes, under an hour, definitely. Now, I'm going to blow your mind a little bit, and this is something even people who know this game don't realize, and this kind of gives us somewhat of a historical connection and link. At the end of the day, this game is nothing more than Operation Barbarossa, German invasion of Russia. Kind of take a look. All right, yep. So here's the River Styx, which is, you know, the border between Germany, Poland, Yugoslavia, Hungary, and Russia. Down here, Hell's Reach. This is the Crimean Peninsula. Paldius, right here. This is impassable. And I just got a knock at the door, so I will be right back. Anyways, we are back. So here we have the Paldius Mountain and the Diablo Mountain, which are impassable, which are kind of represented in the Pripyat Marshes. Up here in the north, Hades, Leningrad, Acheron, that's Moscow. Tartar is down here, Stalingrad. And it really is nothing more than a space version of the invasion of Germany. A lot of people don't pick up on that. A lot of people don't make that connection, but it's there. So, anyways, that's a look at the Battle of Armageddon. I'm probably not going to put this on the table to play it, primarily because it doesn't lend itself well to solitaire play, just because of the random event cards and how the strategy tiles are played each turn. But, like I said, I would really recommend, if you get your chance to get your hands on it or to play a game of it, this is kind of a gem from an unknown gem from way back in the day. It's Games Workshop, but it was from a time when Games Workshop actually cared about making games. And that's all I got. I hope everybody enjoyed. Questions, comments, concerns, complaints, criticisms in the comment section. See ya!